Could Godzilla survive the universe of Stephen King? Let's find out. First of all, happy Halloween. I've had fun covering all these horror IPs and covering these spooky topics, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But it's not over just yet, as we've got one last topic before we move into the holiday season. And I wanted to cover this topic specifically because I knew that there was a new Pennywise show that came out as of recently, and I knew that the Stephen King universe happens to be one of the most powerful verses in fiction. And when it comes to the threats proposed in this cosmology, I know that it's pretty versatile, and I knew a lot of you guys also liked my Godzilla analog horror video, so in the spirit of that, let's kind of just do that again, but talk about the Stephen King cosmology. And hey, you might learn something. As for starters, yes, for the majority of Stephen King's works, they all take place in one overlapping universe or multiverse. So for the most part, we're just gonna be plucking Godzilla in it for the most part. And like my analog horror video, we're gonna be taking apart each tier of power and using a narratively appropriate Godzilla, all in order to see how he would fare with that rank or level of Stephen King power. I like to do this because we'll cover tons of Godzillas and tons of different stories that vary in power levels. I don't want to just cover the top tiers and then cover a top tier Godzilla because I think that would be kind of boring. But don't worry, you're going to be seeing tons of iconic Stephen King characters in today's video. So if that sounds interesting to you, then be sure to stick around. But first, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We've already made 100,000 subscribers and that was our year goal, yes. But seeing as how, we're still growing at a rapid rate, let's just see how far we go. Sky's the limit at this point. I want to thank each and every one of you guys who's taken the time to subscribe and watch my content, as it really means the world to me. And if you're new here, then don't be a stranger. We post tons of videos like this, whether it's shorts or long formatted stuff. You're going to be getting a lot of content out of me, and considering it's all free, I think it's you should at least consider it. But with that being said, let's get into the topic that you clicked the video to find out. Alright, so the first batch of Stephen King antagonists I want to talk about are the vampire from Salem's Lot, Cujo the rabid dog, and just the Overlook Hotel in its entirety. These are obviously some of the weaker characters in this cosmology, but they're some of the most iconic, so I want to at least talk about them. And in terms of the least physically imposing, you've got Cujo the dog, who's literally just a dog, and he has feats that reflect that, such as mauling people to death, being, extremely fast and agile, and pretty much that's it, he's a dog. The next guy we've got is the vampire from Salem's Lot, and he has somewhat more impressive feats, as he was able to kill 2 people by just smashing their heads into each other, and he should be stronger than other vampires in his story that can tank shotgun shells, so he's arguably a street to wall level character as well. And honestly, the most dangerous thing, in quotes by the way, is the Overlook Hotel, as it's literally a haunted mansion of sorts. And I said dangerous in quotes, by the way, because if you're a character like Godzilla who just destroys buildings on the regular, it should be light work. And especially combine that with the fact that some Godzillas can just blow up spirits, then, light work, no reaction. And that goes for pretty much a dog and a vampire as well. I think it should honestly go without saying that pretty much any Godzilla ever should be able to take down these threats specifically. So with that being said, let's really start the video. Moving up the chain, we've got much grander and much more powerful threats. Starting off with the monsters in the mist, and these guys are pretty vast and various. And seeing as how I'm going over tons of different Stephen King stories and talking about so much other monsters, I don't really want to waste you guys' time by talking about the stuff that's only realistically around wall level. So let me just talk about the most powerful beast from the mist, as it's this giant behemoth that we only see for a split second during the end portion of the story. And he has no feats, unfortunately, but just due to his size alone, he's already much stronger than the past guys we've talked about. And it's actually been calculated on the Versus Wiki that his GBE actually gets around to large building level. So just by moving around, he's outputting energy comparable to what would be required to destroy a large building. So you could probably argue he's around city block when he's actually trying in his attacks and such. Moving on to city block level characters, and we've got the Wendigo from the story Pet Sematary. As well, yes, the most famous characters from this short story are the zombie baby and cat. But because of that, it's easy to forget that the main antagonist is actually a freaking Wendigo. And this guy is massive and he's very powerful. As characters in the story describe it to be around 60 feet tall, and when he walks, he shakes the forest that he lives in. So we've likely got another building level character on our hands, and if we examine the quote that says that he's able to shake the forest just by stepping around, and you can assert that just by stepping, he's causing mini fissures or earthquakes, assuming that it's something comparable to like a Mag 5, something that's, you know, it's not super violent, but you can still feel it. And that would mean that the earthquake energy would be in those city block level ranges, but seeing as how he's just causing it in its entirety, and you could argue him to be unironically around city level off that, as the total seismic energy produced by such a phenomenon would be comparable to nearly 10 whole megatons of TNT. Moving on to other city town level threats, and we've got Carrie, as yes, unironically, while she is clearly a glass cannon, really what gets her in this area of conversation are her psychic abilities that allow her to destroy buildings, something that's really prominent as that's what the climax of the book is. She just pulls her house into the ground and collapses the thing on top of both of her and her mother. But if we want to use adaptations of the story to get her higher, there's a version of it in which she can literally hail freaking meteors from the sky, like a Final Fantasy boss or something. Like, this is pretty comically powerful, but you know, that's pretty much the extent of her scaling. She's a glass cannon, but as we laid out, with her psychic abilities, she can produce very impressive feats. And the last bunch of characters that I want to talk about, you know, in terms of this more urban threats, are the Tommyknocker aliens from the Tommyknockers. As aliens, they're physically just way stronger than human beings, but it's really their tech that gets them, you know, into this line of conversation, as they have things that can vaporize entire stone statues, which come out to around building level for their guns. But most impressively, their spaceship is able to harness energy to a town level extent. This is shown to us at the end of the film, in which human characters are able to harness the aliens' power that they absorbed from the dreams of humans back onto the alien ship, in which it caused an explosion of that magnitude. And while the ship did not no-sell it, obviously it was destroyed, but that's because the energy was targeted onto itself. So obviously, if it could have harnessed that power in the form of a laser, there you go. You got town-level alien ships. So with this batch of Stephen King villains, let's see how a version of the Kingdom Monsters will respond to such threats. So to sum it all up, we've got aliens, kaiju, psychic girls, and honestly, the most narratively appropriate Godzilla for this matchup is Heisei Godzilla, as he's the only Godzilla I can think of that's fought similar threats. And no, I'm not going to use like the super high-end Heisei Godzilla, not quite yet at least, but I'll be limiting myself to 84 Godzilla. But even then, seeing as how all these threats roughly capped in the town level range to possibly even city level, it's not really looking too good for these guys when Godzilla, just by waking up in this continuity, is able to break apart an island. And there's also the fact that as a mere baseline, he's stronger than the original 54 Godzilla, who tanked multiple nuclear bombs as a simple part of his origin story. It's just kind of what you get with him. And 84 Godzilla's whole thing is that he's stronger. I think for the most part, he's just gonna blow up any of these guys if they ever try to step to him. And as for Carrie and her psychic abilities, there's the fact that Godzilla in this continuity would go on to no-sell such threats to the point where it would actually be detrimental to the psychic when trying to really get into his head. So I predict something similar would happen here. And though that was an 89 Godzilla, this is an 84 Godzilla. Obviously, 89 Godzilla is stronger than his 84 self, but I mean, seeing as how the only difference between the two is that one of them was sitting in a volcano for a couple of years. And it stands to reason that a similar thing would happen when trying to influence an 84 Godzilla. And honestly, guys, I don't know what to say. This is pretty embarrassing for Stephen King. Is this really where the verse caps in terms of its power? Like, we've been talking about city-level characters for the better part of this video. Is this really where Stephen King caps? Well, let's get into that. Here we're going to see a massive leap in power, as we're going to find out why exactly the Stephen King cosmology is so feared and respected. And honestly, I was very, very surprised reading up on some of this stuff, and I think you're going to be surprised as well. The easiest way to really get my point across is just to explain the Dark Tower and its relationship to existence, as it serves as a nexus to every story and universe that exists in the Stephen King world. And obviously it upscales the base multiverse. Well, how big is said multiverse? And let's dive into that, as in the Dark Tower 1, an analogy is made, and try to hold on because it's pretty out there. So essentially, just imagine a desert and then imagine one individual grain of sand in that desert. That grain that we have in our hands here is its own universe. Now, keep in mind that each universe has the capacity to spawn its own individual hierarchy of universes. So unironically, each universe can spawn an infinite amount of other universes. And that's just one grain of sand. And imagine an entire desert's worth of this stuff. And all of it all comes back to the Dark Tower. Meaning that at worst, the Dark Tower would arguably be a 6-dimensional construct. But this is still a very massive lowball, as going back to our desert analogy, imagine each grain of sand, once again, and how I've talked about how each grain of sand has the capacity to have infinite universes spawn from it. Well, it's also alluded to that each universe that spawns from this individual universe is a dimensional's length greater than the last. So, unironically, you've got a 3D universe, and a 4D universe, and a 5D universe, all the way up to infinity. This is substantiated in the text as the system is likened to atoms resting upon the surface of a leaf, while those atoms possessing a reality of their own that remain almost imperceivable within the greater structure that is the grain of sand. This would make the Stephen King multiverse at least an outerversal construct, and the Dark Tower being the nexus point of all of this would upscale to such levels. And I know what you're thinking, well, who scales to the Dark Tower? And honestly, a lot of people do. As for starters, Maturin the giant cosmic turtle scales to the Dark Tower, and it sits upon the guy's shell. And keep in mind, the Dark Tower is infinite in comparison to that entire hypothetical desert. So already you've got Maturin the giant cosmic turtle is arguably like high outerversal. And then you got Pennywise's true form, the Deadlights. And yes, true form Pennywise scales to the turtle as he's literally the complete universal opposite of him. Like he's the yin to his yang. So true form Pennywise and Maturin the turtle, high outerversal. You've got the Crimson King, a character who threatens and wants to just destroy the entire Dark Tower, high outerversal. And then you've got Gon, the creator of the entire cosmology, a guy who's so far above everything we talked about that he exists on a level that is described as indescribable or unimaginable compared to everything else. So yeah, I think that, I'm not gonna lie, that's the most powerful. These are some of the most powerful guys I've ever scaled on the channel here. So it goes without saying that Godzilla's honestly cooked. I don't think there's a single version of the character that unironically scales to such comparable levels at a consistent basis. Heisei Godzilla, the guy that I've got on my thumbnail, he's only realistically around 5 to 6D. As he's upscale Space Godzilla who could harness super gravity, which is inherently super dimensional in a cosmology where 4D is seen as like just regular. So using arguably the strongest live action Godzilla's power scaling chains, and he wouldn't even scale to even like a quantifiable percentage of a single grain of sand that makes up the Stephen King cosmology. And I think it's the same for pretty much any other Godzilla you could think of. Marvel Godzilla's scaling chains are not this good or consistent. And to be honest, the Stephen King cosmology is just far grander than the Marvel cosmology. So his Marvel scaling is not saving him this time. So in conclusion, Godzilla pretty much stomps out everyone in the Stephen King universe until he doesn't. And the guys that he doesn't stomp out, he just stands like no chance at all.